using sound as a form of moving our emotional state is actually a part of our humanity. We are tapped deeply into the language of vibration. And you know this because the vernacular around the way that we speak about our experience with the world is actually coded in vibrational energy. Because we say things like in tune, we were in tune with one another if you're speaking about being copacetic with one person or a group of people. We might talk about good vibrations, and the Beach Boys talked about it as such when you're resonant with something. And so the language of good vibrations is encoded into the vernacular of the way that we experience ourselves together and as individuals. And so all of these things are based on cycles, on frequencies. Everything in nature is cyclic. So you have your heartbeat, you have your breath. On a macro perspective, you have 4 seasons. On a bigger macro perspective, you have the precession of the equinox in the way the earth predictably changes its axis and its rotation on a frequency that even people thousands of years ago, without the benefit of telescopes, intuited. And so when we learn to listen to the frequency and the energy and the sound in the world, we can see the deep connection between vibration, our consciousness, and our ability as human beings to experience ourselves and one another. And so I want to share with you again here just a little bit about what Sound School really is, because Sound School is not just, as I mentioned before, about a way to tap singing bowls. What makes a practitioner great, and by practitioner, I don't just mean someone who publicly performs a service for other people of facilitating a sound journey. A practitioner is each of us when we play our singing bowl at home, or when we attend to a meditation or devotional or prayer or gratitude ritual that serves us personally. What makes us great as practitioners is not the technicality of how we play, but how we are. And so what Sound School is an incorporation of special instruments using singing bowls as our tools, as our canvas, and a 10-week journey where we learn together to remember how we can live looking at the world through the lens of frequency. And so the same frequencies that calm our minds and calm our bodies through breath, through intentional movement, and through the opposite and inverse of those things, complete stillness and silence, these are the frequencies that we learn to wield in Sound School. And so sound, yoga, Ayurveda, meditation, these things are all the same language expressed differently. And so Jonathan Adams, in the first conversation that we had about Sound School, talked about cycles. And in yoga, we talk about cycles: the day, seasons, body, mind. In Ayurveda, we look at how the planets, the elements, the time impact our state of being. And sound is another representation of these same cycles. And the frequency is how often something happens in those cycles. And everything alive moves in cycles at a particular frequency. When we play and wield sound consciously, as we learn to do in the Om Source Sound School, we move with the rhythm of life instead of against it. So we are getting in tune, in resonance, in vibration, positive vibration, in synchronicity with the cycles and the speed at which they operate, which is their frequency. And so in Sound School, what we're talking about is not learning to play. We are learning to play technically. We're learning more, though, how sound and vibration is actually the underlying fabric of our reality, and how we can use it as a tool for transformative evolution for ourselves and for other people, should we choose. And so The idea is that the mystical side of sound, as we often see in the internet, right, there's often a spiritual underpinning of singing bowls and sound therapy or sound healing. But this mysticism or metaphysical aspect of things, it doesn't mean anything if you can't deliver it practically. And so we want to marry these things together and cover the full spectrum. Everything from base musical theory to the meditative principles to deep practical knowledge around playing your bowls and how understanding the formula of how to structure the experience for others. So there is no required baseline or prerequisites, as they called them in college. There's no prerequisite to taking an experienced sound school. You can have 40 years of musicianship and musical theory and practice, or you can have zero. And the reason for this is because we've structured this so that everyone learns something regardless of their starting point, and there's different tangents that you can take if you need a little bit of extra information. And so, for example, if you understand musical theory and you don't need to take that part of the course, you don't need to take that. But for those that need a basic understanding in musical theory and musicality, you can take, right, a little introduction to that, the minimum that you need to know in order to benefit from what's going on. So in sound school, you will learn tone, frequency, and interval relationships. Things like, why does a perfect fifth feel open? Why do certain notes played in a certain way with certain silence settle the nervous system? You'll learn the creation of the structure, the formula, the foundation for a sound journey, how to balance intention with some spontaneity, meaning responding to the energy of what's going on in the room, using scales, using modes, using tonal setters to shape emotion and resonance. You'll learn how to integrate instruments into cohesive soundscapes that can change people in an instant, right? When you hear a song that you love or you resonate with the sound of a singing bowl, it's not generally a gradual feeling. We can change ourselves in an instant through the careful wielding of sound in a particular and intentional way, and that's what we're aiming for. And so sound school is a combination of music theory, of yoga, of philosophy, and a mirroring of how these all come together. So yoga studies cycles, sound studies frequency. The frequency is just the intervals of the cycles. They are the same thing. There's another layer of this work that we aim to engender, and that's humility. So beyond vanity, beyond the performance aspect of sound school, there is the creation of a space where another person can safely return to themselves for self-healing. One of my personal mentors in the space, whose reading has been so impactful for me, is Alexandre Tenu. And what Alexandre Tenu shares is that we're not actually, when approaching something like this, sound healers. We're not literally wielding the magic formula that heals someone else. What we are doing is, to the best of our ability, creating a set of conditions so that someone else can focus their energy internally on healing themselves. And so we're creating an environment of safety, of opportunity for someone to be able to go within. And as a healer, a therapist, a facilitator, you are working with your true self beyond the vanity of just performance. And that's the core of your head teacher, Jonathan Adams' philosophy. It's the same consciousness that exists in you, that exists in everyone. And that's why our intention going into the way that we wield this transforms so much and matters so much. So as practitioners, right, if you're sitting there thinking, I hope I win this slot, or you're sitting there thinking, I'm excited to enroll, your potential job is not to fix anyone, including yourself. Your job, our outcome goal, the study, the experiment that we all run together with us as a guide, is, can we create the necessary conditions for ourselves and for other people to allow our nervous systems to relax and integrate. And that's what we're doing. We're holding a safe field where people can soften, where people can remember, where people can view trauma and difficult conversations they want to have and difficult things with the crystal clear reality of empathy and compassion because of the space that we can lead them in. And of course, it always starts with ourselves. And so there is a performance aspect, speaking candidly, to what happens in a sound therapy or a sound session. And also, it's going so much beyond that. And so this is a very personal work that we all do together, which is why it's so immersive, which is why it's so comprehensive, which is why there's a combination of pre-recorded curriculum, at-home specific dedicated practice, and plenty of opportunity every single week during Sound School to interact with myself, Jonathan, and your other teachers, is because it truly needs to be a two-way conversation about what you're going through. And so Jonathan, your head teacher, has told a story about a watershed moment that he experienced in his life. And it's something like he woke, and by the way, if you want to just hear this from Jonathan, I posted a link to an interview that I did with him. And so you can actually hear this, but I'm doing my best to relay something that was really impactful in the telling of it from Jonathan. And so Jonathan, excuse me, he woke up in the middle of the night and he heard a sound. It was a low, deep vibration. It was the sort of vibration, woo, 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 modulating that seemed to be coming from nowhere and everywhere, kind of like that stereo surround sound. And he checked the house, he checked outside, he listened carefully, and he realized that the sound was not outside of him, but it was in everything. And so his takeaway from this, the lesson that he has shared with us, is that everything in nature vibrates together. And when he began intuitively collecting singing bowls all those years ago, the sound that he heard was, in that dream, in that vision, was the sound that he was chasing with the sounds of these pulsing, modulating, handmade Tibetan singing bowls. And so that was Jonathan's story. And after all of Jonathan's training, and what I mean by that is Jonathan is a classically trained musician. Jonathan was an incredible performing what you'd call a jam band. Jonathan has been facilitating experiences with singing bowls and sound for many years now. And when he goes into a session, often he is able to adjust according to the needs of the individual souls in that room. And that's because once you feel the energy of a particular space and see what real people are dealing with, you realize that the integration of the sound that you're going to share with people is not going to be a linear experience. It's going to be exponential and it is going to be individual to people, even if you're facilitating for a group of distinct people. And so what we want to do in the idea of facilitating for so many distinct people, unique human souls coming with their own hurt, their own wants, needs, and desires, is that we want to understand a formula, a rules, a foundational structure of how we can create these experiences. And the reason that we want to learn the rules and the reason that we teach you specific rules and intentionality is so that way you can achieve a level of skillfulness, as our friend Ben Irons says, so that eventually you can study the structure so that you can play freely. And so I mentioned in the email, and I think it's worth bringing up again, Picasso said you have to learn the rules like a pro so you can break them like the artist. And so we are not for full intuition playing. I am personally not, I would not describe the way to successfully approach the facilitation of experience for other people as channeling. That may be a part of a description of how some people may approach it, but what we're looking for here is to teach you a real repeatable structure and understanding How does an experience come together for yourself and other people? And then, and only then, can we allow our intuition um, to tap into what's going on so we can adjust freely and do something like intuitive playing, like channeling. But at that point, it's not exactly intuitive playing and channeling. It's an integration of knowledge that allows us to be free, but we're subconsciously still following patterns that we understand. And so you cannot facilitate something unless you have experienced it for yourself. And so the work of facilitation, in my estimation, begins with ourselves. Um, and Marcus Aurelius has a quote that I personally like, and it's essentially, I can't remember the exact quote, but it's something like, be harsh with yourself and compassionate with others. And the main idea behind that is that to be a practitioner or a facilitator and to share these things, we can really be committed to our own personal evolution, and also very, very compassionate with other people. We can be harder on ourselves than we are on other people. And that's not an advocacy for self flagellation. Oh, I did such a bad job. I'm still not as good as Jonathan or Dr. Sandra or Jen. That's not what I'm calling for. I'm calling for the idea of a blank slate and a beginner's mindset, regardless of where you're starting at. We can always be a little bit better. We can always personally evolve a little bit more in the service of other people. We can be kinder and more compassionate and more understanding. Um, and so during this sound school process, we emphasize personal meditation practice and mindfulness as a part of the sound school journey. And we want to develop presence and compassion and self awareness as a part of serving other people. In short, we want to learn how we can manage our own nervous systems, and self awareness of managing our own nervous systems is a process of serving others. And so in sound school, yeah, we're learning musicianship, we're learning technical craft, but we're also cultivating presence, humility, um, and allowing ourselves the management of our own nervous system so that we can be of service. Whether that's of service in our day to day lives, where we don't have any intention, maybe, of sharing this with other people, but we're just doing it as an exercise in personal development, all the way through developing ourselves personally so that we can be of service to paying clients or to the people that we're going to share this with. Um, and you can serve yourself and others through this modality as sound. You can use it uniquely as sound. You can use it as a complement to Reiki or other energetic practices. You can use it as a complement or in addition to body work like meditation. You can use it as a complement or an adjunct to breath work, to coaching. It's an opportunity for you to manage nervous systems through vibration and through frequency in a way that the concept is Lindy. Nassim Taleb talks about Lindy being a concept of something survives for a really long time, generally only because it's useful. And so the use of sound, frequency, mantra, chanting is Lindy. It's survived for thousands of years in human culture, and we can now go into the science of how that works in our nervous systems and our brain waves. But the fact that it's survived so long tells us that it's frankly just useful. And so all of this matters because we, people, are overwhelmed today. And our nervous systems are frayed at the edges. And this is not about solving things that are happening out there. It's solving things that are happening in here and allowing who we become to change the people that we interact with by changing our nervous systems. And so to put it in like a bold and courageous way, we are warriors on behalf of the nervous systems and ourselves and other people, and intentional use of sound can help us tap into that. So obviously, I'm passionate about this, and also obviously, sound school is not for everyone. It's for people who, if you've experienced a moment of resonance that made time stand still, and you know there's something more for you than it might be for you. It might be for you if you are already a practitioner and anything that we've said about our approach resonates with you to go deeper. It might be for you if you've simply loved the sound of your singing bowl and you want to go on a personal development journey of studying the concepts in depth for 10 weeks with people who are absolutely enamored with the process. It's for you if you're a beginner. It's for you if you are a quote unquote practicing expert. It's for you if you are wielding Reiki or energy or breath work. Everything is vibration. And so the invitation in Sound School is to learn how to work with it intentionally, with increasing skillfulness so it can change the way that you live. And so that is what I was called to share about singing bowls and sound school. And a lot of what I wrote and what I shared was inspired by that initial conversation that I had with the head teacher of sound school, Jonathan Adams. And so all of that is sound school. And the very practical nature of sound school is that you will learn how to create structure and facilitate a sound experience. And you will learn this in a comprehensive and immersive process that goes on for 10 weeks through a combination of pre-recorded expert curriculum, through a combination of coaching opportunities live every single week on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. You will weekly experience